Welcome to Lift Your Story podcast with guest Dr. Rick Chromey, author, speaker, and historian. Hi, everyone. I am Lori Ann. I am that gal from Mississauga, Ontario, Canada, and I'm with.
I am that guy. I am Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to our Lift Your Story podcast.
In this episode, we welcome Dr. Rick Chromey, and he is an author, speaker, historian, founder of a not-for-profit, which we'll be speaking to. And thank you so much for being here with us.
Hey, it's great to be with you, that girl and that guy. How much fun is this going to be?
Well, hopefully it'll be a lot of fun.
Always.
So, Rick, tell us a little bit about your childhood. I understand you had a kind of a interesting childhood.
Oh my, yes, that's a story in itself that could probably go for hours and hours. But the nutshell, the small story is simply this: is I was born and raised in Lewistown, Montana, central Montana. Basically grew up just kind of a Norman Rockwell type of life. But around age 12, my mom got into drugs and alcohol and abandoned the family. And my dad was abusive, if you will, and he eventually, I basically grew up without parents, is what I'm saying. After age 12, I lived with my grandparents. They probably saved me from many other issues and stuff. But, I spent most of my life, really to my 50s, dealing with abandonment issues. And that is the backstory of who I am, because I'm a small guy. From basically nowhere, Montana, and I have found success in life, but I've only done it by believing in myself, even when nobody else would, because I heard a lot of negative Nellies out there, a lot of detractors, got a lot of rejections in life, but I have just kept going forward, finding a path, and making a way.
Yeah, so you got a college education, master's degree, a PhD.
Yes. Yeah. And the doctorate's actually a doctorate of ministry. I'm a pastor in my former life, and also a professor of ministry. So I did a doctorate of ministry, DMin, and that was in leadership and the emerging culture, which opened up all sorts of new doors for me in my present world, where I help people navigate culture and understand history.
Okay. So in your bio, you've kind of delved into the generational aspect, the baby boomers, the Gen X, Gen Z, millennial, whatever. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, that's my latest book. It is a book it's called GenTech. It's short for Generations in Technology, and essentially what it does is that it captures what I believe a new way to look at generations, as opposed to these old names and frames which mean basically nothing. What does Gen X or Gen Z mean? Baby boomer at least has a little bit of meaning, maybe millennial as well. But we just get lost in that. And a lot of people, the frames are so clunky and so stiff, and people just really don't like them. And so I started looking at generations through the eyes of technology. And I just found that there's about every 10 years, a new technology pops that really starts to frame a generation. So we become part of two generational technology, or two tech gens, if you will, because every generation is about 20 years long. And in the book, I go all the way back to 1900. It's a fascinating historical study, and we can talk more about that if you want. But that's a capsule. We're not baby boomers. We're the television and space generation. We're not Gen X. We're the cable television and gamer generation. We're not millennials. We're the personal computer, cell phone, and net generation. That's how I look at us.
Well, it's interesting because, I am a baby boomer, and I know you're right there at the end. You're still in what they consider the baby boomer.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm born in 1963, and that was probably what started me on this whole journey. Was baby boomers were defined in 1980, by the way, by a guy who wrote a book called Great Expectations, and he used the word baby boom generation in the title, but he defined it as between 1946 and 1964. The problem is, being born in 1963, I never felt an affinity towards the baby boom generation. I always felt like I was part of the next generation that was coming. And this is one of the points I make in my book, is I think that there's what we call cultural memory. And I think those cultural memories, they're big events that happen about every 20 years as well, that we remember. And if you can't remember a certain event, you're basically separated from that generation that does. And that big event for you was the assassination of John F. Kennedy. You know, if you can remember John F. Kennedy's assassination, you're of a different generation than me. I don't remember that at all. My first cultural memory was a moonshot, a man walking on the moon. My big event that defined my generation was the Challenger explosion in 1986. So, you know, every generation has these cultural moments, these historical events that define them. You know, the millennials have been defined by 9/11, you know, September 11th, 2001. I think the current generation is going to be defined by COVID, the COVID moment that we're in. So,
well, you know, I was born in the 50s, and really, I mean, I consider myself really growing up in the 60s, because that's what I, you know.
yeah.
And so I can remember coming home from school, seeing the civil rights every night on TV.
Yeah.
Vietnam, every night on TV. Of course, you know, Kennedy got assassinated. You know, we got sent home from school. I was watching TV when Jack Ruby got killed.
Mm.
Then, you know, I will say this: we had the coolest cars and the best music in the 60s. Now, you know, that was kind of the counterculture, you know, started, and the peace, love, and all that hippie.
Woodstock.
You know, yeah. So I mean, I was in that. That's my childhood. There you go. So, and you know, it didn't seem strange to me at the time. I know my mother, she used to just freak out because she's worried to death about the world we were growing up into.
Yeah.
You know, we thought, hey, it's great. What are you talking about? You know, and now I worry about my grandkids, the world they're growing up in.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so
I feel like you, Rick, though. I'm 1962. And when they say boomer, I feel more like what they call the Gen X. I really think that boomers should have stopped at 1960, the biggest birth year of pretty well of males. I think it was like the highest ever population. And after that, really, I just feel that I see it as stopping in 1960, the boomers, because even to speak to that, by the time we got into the workforce, all our jobs were taken by the boomers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, historians Neil Howe and William Strauss wrote a book called Generations in 1991, and they recast what we call classically the boom generation as being born between 1943 and 1960. And the reason they started in 43 was because that's when demographically the baby boom started. It wasn't 46 after, you know, the bomb dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was actually when European soldiers started coming back from the European theater. American soldiers came back. That's when the baby boom started. It ended in 1960, ironically, by the introduction of the pill into American culture. That's what caused a busting, if you will, of the boom. And so we started to see a demographic go down at that point, a well of births. So, you know, they define, they don't like the word Gen X. I think they used a different word initially, 13th gen or something like that, which I found interesting. Gen X tend to stick, but 1961 to 1981 is their classic definition for the next generation.
Interesting.
Yeah.
well, and the millennials seem to be blaming the baby boomers for all the millennials' problems.
Really? I see the baby boomers blaming the millennials for all their problems.
No, the millennials always saying, "Oh, well, it's your fault that I've got a college education in earth science and I can't find a job in, or some, you know, basket weaving or underwater basket weaving I can't find a job in." Well, duh.
You polluted you polluted the earth with all the plastic and all that stuff.
Oh yeah,
All your fault.
Yeah. Yes. You know, but that's as old as the hills. Baby boomers, you might remember my friend, back in the late 60s, when the boom generation themselves were being called all sorts of names by their elders, and they were being cast. Gen X, my generation, when I came of age, we were called the lazy, slack, dumb generation. Every generation gets its negative monikers. And part of what I want to do is, again, recast that idea. Let's look through the lens of technology as frames for how we communicate with one another, how we interact, how we buy, how we worship, every aspect of our lives. And I think technology can frame that. You mentioned yourself, every great thing you remember from the 60s was brought to you through the lens of television, right? But if you talk to a millennial, it's different. It's going to be through the lens of a cell phone, or through the lens of the internet, or through the lens of social media. It's changed.
Yeah.
Definitely.
What's your take on social media?
Well,
and how it's affecting the generations?
Well, first of all, there's no doubt that it has a negative effect on certain personalities. Let's be honest. There are certain kids, and there's always been these kids that have certain issues. Maybe it's emerging within their family, personality issues, whatever it might be, where social media can be a severe problem for them. And such. We've created, if nothing else, I think in general, narcissistic culture through social media, where it's all about me. On the other hand, I like to point out the positive sides of social media that we often overlook. Look at Facebook, for example. I've been on Facebook since 2004. I was one of the early adopters of it because I was a professor. And in the early days, you could only get onto Facebook if you were connected to an educational institution. And so I was in there very early. And every day I like to go look at my memories page, because literally I have I got years and years of memories, and I can see where I was at and see what I was thinking. I think Facebook is doing an interesting job, and I don't think it intended it to be this way, of creating a social history of who we really are, through our memes, through our statements, through our posts. When you look at YouTube, it's doing the same thing. It's creating a video history of who we really are. I find that fascinating. The Google Books Project, as a historian, it's very difficult to get your hands on a lot of books from the 19th century, for example. But you go to Google Books, you can get literally just about any book from the 1900s or the 1800s if you want to, if you're needing it for research purposes. So I look at these great the social media as more of a positive thing as far as what it's doing as a whole. Now, obviously, again, there are negative attributes to it, and it can be dangerous in some situations as well. I'll tell you the one thing I don't like, and that is when we use social media as a place to eliminate free speech. I don't think speech, at least in America, we talk about how we have a constitutional right to freedom of speech. I don't think social media, and I don't think the platforms out there, it's their job to censor information. It's their job to basically, I don't need to be fact checked by Facebook, is what I'm saying. Right, I'll be fact checked by my peers. This is what I love about Wikipedia. Wikipedia is probably the most accurate encyclopedia we have. A lot of professors will go nuts for me saying that, but it's true, because it literally, if there's a Wikipedia entry, and as a researcher, if there's a Wikipedia entry that has flags all over it, I know going in to hold it in suspicion. I think we, the people, can fact check ourselves. And I've often posted something where someone else has come back and fact checked me, and I went, oh, you're right. So I corrected my initial post to that. That's what should happen in a democracy, in a we the people culture that we are in, at least in America. Up there in Canada, same thing, though. I think we the people are flexing their muscles right now up there in Ottawa, aren't they?
Yes. They are. Interesting too, to add to the Facebook, I lived in many different areas. I lived in Turkey when I was a kid. I moved around a lot. And that's one thing I do love about Facebook. I found friends, even my friend that I don't even remember not knowing, and I moved away at 7 years old, and I found her on Facebook. And so we're back talking to each other after I don't know how many years. And
Yeah.
that part of it is where I really enjoyed it. And sometimes, you know, I'll say to myself, well, maybe I should just get off of Facebook, but then I lose that connection that
Right.
that's the main frame of where I find them and where I keep in contact with them.
Yeah. Facebook blew up the high school reunion. For those of us who go, I just went to my 40th high school reunion last summer. We were doing high school reunions before Facebook. But you look at the high school reunion today among the younger generations, they're not doing high school reunions. They're doing Facebook reunions, and maybe a small group of them will go off and do a vacation together. But the high school reunion is largely going the way of the dinosaur as a result of Facebook.
Well, you know, I fought against Facebook. I didn't get on until 2011 because I thought, well, this is just too invasive. But then the reason I got on it because everybody says, oh, do you know that so-and-so had a baby? No. When? Oh, it's on Facebook. It's on Facebook. So you almost had to get on Facebook to know what's going on in your family.
Yeah.
You know, because that's how everybody kept in touch. And then, like you say, reunions. I graduated in 1969 from high school. So I got back on there, but able to connect with people from back in high school that otherwise I never would have since then ever seen, heard, you know. And I've met some great people that I didn't really know personally in high school, but I know now through Facebook and stuff. So, you know, I think that part was great. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you notice too, I think we tend to self-correct ourselves on Facebook as well. You know, there was, at least in America, there was a season there where it got very politically heated on Facebook, but eventually people stopped reading those posts. They stopped liking those posts. They stopped, you know, sharing those posts. And eventually those posts started to just kind of dwindle. I know of a lot of people who just say, I don't write anything political on Facebook, you know, and I think that's part of, yeah, I'm not sure that's a good thing either. I think part of conversation, you know, I grew up in a family where I was told you never talk about religion or politics with people. And yet I think those are the two things we probably should talk about. You know, I think religion and politics tend to be great conversation starters, as well as, you know, if it's done with the R word, which is respect. You know, if we can respect the differences, it can produce some amazing dialogues.
Yeah. I mean, yes, you say, if you're open with it, you know, I'm probably not going to change your mind. You're probably not going to change my mind. But I know this, my mother used to always say, it's okay to disagree, just don't be disagreeable.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, but, you know, sometimes the passion goes a little bit too far.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Well, and that's I think for some people, the negative side of Facebook, I've got a few friends like this. They want to post everything about their life, even what they're having for supper. You know, it's just, I know of somebody who actually posts, I don't know what I'm going to have for supper. I've got 3 choices. Which one should I make? I'm going, seriously? You need Facebook to determine your menu? Yeah. It's like, come on.
I've got one of my sister's granddaughters posts pictures of herself, selfies all the time. And I'm like, really? Are you really that narcissistic? You got to see yourself 10 posts a day on Facebook? I mean,
yeah. And I struggle with the selfie. I'll be honest, I struggle with the selfie because on one hand, you know, I find that that for me, it's very like, really, I don't want to post a picture of myself. This is kind of, like you said, narcissistic. But on the other hand, when I occasionally do, like with my wife, or I'll have my granddaughter or something, I'll post that, you know, I get a lot more likes and thumbs ups and comments and stuff when I do that. And I don't know, I'm sure they're probably, you know, celebrating my granddaughter or my grandchildren, but you know, part of me likes to think, well, maybe they just like my mug too. You know?
Well, you know, there's nothing wrong with doing that in moderation, you know, because you know, I think people are interested in other people, you know, their life, you know, but not every second that they, you know, oh, I'm at Starbucks, I got a mocha latte, whatever. Oh, I'm over here at Target, I bought me a new hat. I mean, who cares? I mean, I'm not a Kardashian. I don't want to be a Kardashian. And I don't really want to see anybody that thinks they're a Kardashian.
I like you, Roy. I think you and I could go out and have a cup of coffee or a beer together and be all right.
Oh,
You're not old. You're not old at all. You're getting younger every year.
if only.
I know we were talking about that. My mother's 86, and my sister and I said, "Oh my goodness, she's getting younger and younger all the time." She, you know, still always our mother, but you're always sort of waiting for her to say that you didn't do something right, or like be that mommy and try and correct you, and she's not doing it anymore, and you're still waiting for it. And she's doing crafts, and she's excited about everything. I'm going, wow. And that's what my sister says. She goes, she's getting younger. I'm going, I love it.
Well, yeah. Heck
Yeah.
yeah.
Plain.
So Rick, when you speak, you've got a pretty wide audience you speak to.
Mhm.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your speaking that you do?
Well, I have a wide audience because I have wide interests, Roy. I mean, it's interesting. I was an Christian education professor for many years, and that kind of opened up a lot of different areas. I taught a lot of different classes. I worked in smaller institutions. So, I taught everything from developmental psychology to, the history and philosophy of education. And so I kind of had a wide string, if you will. And then as time went by, there were certain topics that people just wanted me to talk about. Most of my workshops have been given to me by other people. Probably my most famous workshop, or the one that's really well known, is Why Kids Really Misbehave. That was actually a topic that was given to me for a conference, and I went, okay, why do kids really misbehave? And in the process of bringing that down and putting that in, now I think about it, it wasn't a topic for a conference first. It was a topic for an article. I had somebody wanted me to write on that first. And so as I started to think about that and process it and write it out, it then eventually became a workshop. And that's how I look at everything. Everything I write, can it become something I can communicate in a workshop or a keynote or a message of some sort, a podcast, whatever it might be, a new book. And so I'm just constantly, everything I'm doing is recycling. And I've got now 50 years of recycling, because I can go 40 years to be accurate, 40 years of recycling of material. And it just constantly just finds new places, new avenues. And I don't think I've written nor said my best line yet. I'm still working on that. It could happen here this hour in this podcast, my best line. So watch for it and claim it and tell me I need to do something with it.
Well, I'd say that's a pretty universal topic there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something everybody's interested in.
Yeah.
Well, and I also deal with natural motivation. That came out of a class I was teaching on developmental psychology about how do we motivate someone? How do we, do we use, rewards and gimmicks and bribery and incentives, or is there a way to create natural motivation? And really there isn't, but what you can do is create environments that are naturally attractive. The business world calls it sticky. And so I started to develop this acronym I called the GROWLs, which is an acronym for grace, relationship, ownership, worth, laughter, and security. The 6 distinctive human needs that we all have. We all have a need for grace. We all have a need for relationship. We all have a need for ownership. We want to be large in charge. We want to have control. We want to have choices. We have a need for worth. We want to feel our value. We want to be validated. We also, the L, we want to laugh. We want to be in pleasing and entertaining spaces. And then finally, we do need security. We need to be safe. We need to feel safe and secure. And that became really my heartbeat message. I probably speak on that more than anything, any other topic, is the GROWLs.
Yeah, that's an interesting acronym.
It is.
Yeah.
Growls.
It covers
Yeah,
everything.
well,
I mean,
and
it covers
it came, everything I think about as far as communicating to help you understand, and for those of you listening, if you want to write, you've got to think in this way. You've got to think, how can I make this mind easy? Now, I just kind of made that word up, but how do you make it easy for the mind to remember? Because if you're not memorable, you know, if this podcast isn't memorable, it's going to get lost. It's going to get shelved. It's going to be, you know, but if I can say something unique and distinct, something that's creative, spin it in a certain way, like the growls, or why kids really misbehave. You know, it comes down to 3 B's. You know, it's their beliefs about themselves, it's boredom, or it's a belonging issue again. They don't feel like they're fitting in. That's why they misbehave. And once you understand that, whoa, that solves a lot of how you manage a classroom, how you work with discipline in your own home. It's very, very effective. But the growls came about because I was hungry, literally. My stomach growled and I went, oh, that's an inside job there going on there. My stomach is growling. And I thought, the stomach growls. Oh, there you go. I was looking for a way to cast what I saw as these inner drives that I was reading about and researching. How do I cast them in a way that's memorable? Because you don't remember Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Most people can't rip them off. Most people have never heard, or they don't know about William Glasser's control therapy. He talked about inner needs. So what I've done is create a clever way to remember the inner needs. It's all about creating environments of grace, relationship, ownership, worth, laughter, and security. GROWLS. Yeah.
I like those.
Yeah, it is. Well, Rick, how can our listeners reach out to you?
Well, the easiest way is rickchromey.com. And you can reach me there. I'm also on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. Just go out and find me. I'm everywhere you want to be, basically.
And your book's available where?
The book is available at Amazon and other bookstores. I mean, you can order it in at your bookstore. I often tell people, though, if you order it through me, go to, again, rickchromey.com, go to GenTech. I have a whole area on GenTech. You can order the book through me. I will autograph it as part of that and send it. And it's usually, by the time we get to it, with the pricing and everything, it's the same price as Amazon right now, except you get an autograph with it, if that's important to you. I always say the book is free. The autograph is worth $20. But
well, yeah, Lori and I both like to have autographed books.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a good book, and it's a lot of people love the book. I'm getting some great reviews on it. Part of the reason I'm doing podcasts is because we're trying to COVID that was released in the middle of COVID, and that was a death time for authors to release a book. And so I'm just trying to get some love out there for GenTech. It's a good book. It's a fun book. If you like history, sociology, generations, understanding who you are, you're going to love this book. So,
yeah. You know, COVID also helped a lot of people that were thinking about writing the book. It got them where they did write their book.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All of a sudden they had time.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote my first book when I was 25. And it was actually my master's thesis, and I convinced my master's thesis professor, if I wrote a book and published it, would they accept it as my master's thesis? And they did.
Oh, wow.
So that's how I wrote that first book. But I had to find a publisher out there to actually take it on, and that was harder than I thought. But I actually landed the first publisher I went after. Those days are gone, though, for writers. You know, it's a different world now.
That's incredible, because when I first, my first business was being a literary agent, and I also wrote a book back then, but they said that you were more likely to win the lottery than find a publisher to publish your book. That was what the odds were. Yeah. So
yeah. I talk about it, Laura. You know, I literally went out in this huge lake, threw in an empty hook, no bait or anything. I just threw it in there and landed the biggest fish in the lake. It is, you know, and ever since that day, I thought, well, I can do this again. I can do this again. I've written 12 books overall, and 6 of them now have been published on a national level through a publisher. And it gets harder and harder and harder. Every year it gets harder to do that, but it's because the industry has changed.
Yes.
And writers have to change with the industry.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Very interesting. Really appreciate you being on the podcast. Thank you very much.
It's It's my pleasure. And that girl and that guy, you guys have a lot of fun in the future, and keep listening to this great podcast, by the way, people. Good stuff here.
All right. Thanks a lot, Rick. It was really a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.